1998, Nokia was the most valuable company in Europe. Not one of the most valuable. The most valuable. They made the phone that everyone on Earth wanted to own. They had the engineers, the factories, the distribution, the brand. They had everything. And then, in less than a decade, they lost it all. Not to a war, not to a recession, not to a scandal, to one decision. One single decision made inside a boardroom by people who were not wrong about the technology, who were not wrong about the market, who were not wrong about the future, but who were catastrophically wrong about one thing: themselves. David is sitting in his favorite armchair tonight. He does not usually follow corporate history, but his daughter, home from university, economics textbook in her lap, slides it across the coffee table and says, "Dad, read this chapter. Tell me what you think went wrong." David picks up the book, and over the next 2 hours, he reads one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of business. A story about a company that built the future, and then stood still while the future walked past them. This is the Nokia story, and by the end of it, you will never look at success the same way again. Before we dive into this story, welcome to Finext Wealth. Whether you are here for the first time or you have been with us from the very beginning, we are genuinely glad you are here. This channel exists for one reason: to tell the stories that explain how the financial world actually works. The rises, the falls, the decisions that changed everything, in a way that is honest, clear, and impossible to forget. If this story moves you, and it will, hit subscribe right now, turn on the bell, and share this video with someone who thinks success is permanent. Because Nokia thought so too. Now, let us go back to the beginning. David turns to the first page of the chapter, and the first thing that surprises him is this: Nokia did not start as a technology company. Not even close. Nokia was founded in 1865 in a small town in Finland as a paper mill. A paper mill. They made paper pulp, then rubber boots, then the television cables, then military communication equipment. For over 100 years, Nokia was a company trying to figure out what it was. They changed industries the way most people change careers. Not because they were lost, because they were relentlessly, almost recklessly, willing to start again. And then, in the 1980s, Nokia made the most important pivot in their history. They looked at the emerging world of mobile telecommunications, and they decided that this was where the future lived. David leans forward in his chair. His daughter looks up from her textbook. He says, "They went from rubber boots to mobile phones." She nods. He says, "And it worked?" She smiles. It did not just work, David. It was the most spectacular industrial transformation of the 20th century. By 1998, Nokia had become the world's largest mobile phone manufacturer. Not just in Europe, in the world. 36% of all mobile phones sold on Earth were Nokia phones. David puts the book down for a moment. He stays at the ceiling. He is doing the maths. 36% of every phone on Earth. Nokia in the late 1990s was not just a company. It was a cultural force. The Nokia 3310 launched in the year 2000, and it changed what people believed a phone could be. Durable, affordable, personalized, reliable. You could drop it down a flight of stairs and pick it up without a scratch. You could change the cover, change the ringtone, play Snake during lunch break. Nokia understood something that almost no other company understood at the time. A phone was not just a communication device. It was personal. It was an expression of who you were. And they built that understanding into every product they made. David reads the sales figures and puts the book down again. He says, this company was printing money. His daughter says, 126 million phones sold in the year 2000 alone. David whistles quietly. 126 million. In a single year. Nokia's headquarters in Espoo, Finland, employed some of the most brilliant engineers on the planet. Their research and development budget was enormous. Their logistics network was the most efficient in the industry. And their brand, the word Nokia, meant something in every language on Earth. Reliable, accessible, human. They were not just winning the market. They were defining it. And then, almost without warning, the world began to change. David turns the page. and finds a date that every person in the technology industry remembers. January 9th, 2007. San Francisco. The Moscone Center. Steve Jobs walks onto a stage in his black turtleneck and jeans. He says, "Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything." And he holds up a small, thin, glass-fronted device. No keyboard, no buttons, no cover to change, just a screen. And the world, within days, understood that everything had changed. Nokia's engineers saw the iPhone, and their reaction, their immediate, documented, internal reaction, was not panic. It was dismissed. David stops reading. He says, "They were not scared?" His daughter says, "Worse than that. They were confident." Nokia's internal reports at the time described the iPhone as too expensive, too fragile, with a battery that did not last. All of which was true. The first iPhone had real limitations. But Nokia made a mistake that the most successful companies in history make again and again. They evaluated the iPhone for what it was in January 2007, not for what it would become by January 2009. They measured the present and missed the future. David sits back. He knows this feeling, not from technology, from his own financial life. He has spent years measuring where he is and forgetting to plan for where things are going. Now he reached the chapter that David's daughter wanted him to read. The decision. Inside Nokia in 2007 and 2008, there were two groups of people. Group 1, a team of forward-thinking engineers and product designers who had already built a working touchscreen smartphone. Let that land for a moment. Nokia had a touchscreen smartphone. Before the iPhone launched, their engineers had seen the future. They had built a version of it. They had placed it on the table in front of the leadership team. Group 2, the executives, the board, the people responsible for protecting Nokia's dominant market position. And the executives looked at the touchscreen prototype, and they made their decision. They shelved it, not because it did not work, because launching it would mean admitting that the Nokia 3310, their best-selling product, the foundation of their entire market dominance, was becoming obsolete. It would mean disrupting themselves before someone else disrupted them. And they could not bring themselves to do it. David closes the book. He sits in silence for a moment. His daughter waits. He says, "They already had the answer, and they buried it." She nods. He says, "Why?" She says, "Because being right about the future is terrifying when you are comfortable in the present." David looks out of the window for a long time. He is not thinking about Nokia anymore. What happened next happened fast. Not slowly, not gradually. Fast. 2007, iPhone launches. Nokia laughs. 2008, App Store launches. Nokia watches. 2009, Android arrives. Nokia waits. 2010, Nokia's market share begins to fall. 2011, falls faster. 2012, Nokia posts its first annual loss in decades. David turns the pages quickly now. His daughter watches his expression change. 2013, Microsoft acquires Nokia's mobile phone division for $7.2 billion. Less than 10 years later, Nokia was worth $250 billion. From $250 billion to $7.2 billion. In less than a decade. No fraud, no scandal, no war. Just one decision. Repeated in different forms. Every single quarter. The decision to protect what they had, instead of building what was coming. David puts the book down. He does not speak for almost a minute. His daughter finally says, "What are you thinking?" He says, "I am thinking about every time I chose comfort over change." She looks at him. He says, "Nokia was not stupid. They were comfortable. And comfort is the most expensive thing in the world when the world is moving." David picks the book up again and reads the final section of the chapter, the lessons that business schools have been teaching from Nokia's collapse for over a decade. There are 3. And David reads them out loud, slowly, because they are not just about Nokia. They are about every person who has ever been successful enough to stop being hungry. Lesson 1. Success is the most dangerous place to stand still. Nokia's greatest enemy was not Apple. It was Nokia's own success. When you are winning, the temptation to protect what you have becomes stronger than the drive to build what is next. Every empire in history has fallen not from external attack, but from internal decay. The moment you stop being afraid of losing, you begin to lose. Lesson 2. Disruption always looks small before it looks enormous. The first iPhone had real weaknesses. Nokia was not wrong about that. But they confused the weaknesses of version 1 with the permanent limits of the idea. Every transformational technology in history, electricity, the internet, the smartphone, looked limited and impractical in its earliest form. Nokia saw the seed and dismissed it. They should have been terrified of the tree. Lesson 3. The person who disrupts you will always be someone who has nothing to lose. Nokia had everything to lose. Apple had nothing. Steve Jobs was not protecting a market position. He was building one. People with nothing to protect always move faster than people with everything to protect. And in a world that moves fast, speed is the only currency that never loses value. David closes the book. He hands it back to his daughter. She says, "So what went wrong?" He says, "Everything. And nothing." They made a great product. They built a great company. They dominated a great market. And then they forgot that great is not permanent. Great is a position, and positions can be lost. David sits with the book closed in his lap for a long time. His daughter goes back to her notes. The house is quiet, and David thinks about Nokia. He thinks about the engineers who built the touchscreen prototype, who saw the future clearly, and watched it get shelved by people who were too comfortable to act. He thinks about the executives who made the decision that seemed safe, and created the most expensive mistake in European corporate history. And he thinks about something his neighbor Marcus once said to him. The most dangerous financial position you can be in is one where everything is fine. Because fine is where complacency lives. And complacency is where everything ends. Nokia's story is not a story about technology. It is a story about the psychology of success. About what happens to individuals and companies and entire industries when the fear of losing what they have becomes greater than the hunger to build what comes next. That fear lives in all of us. In the employee who stays in a safe job instead of building something new. An investor who holds a comfortable position instead of moving toward the future. In every person who knows that something needs to change, but chooses to wait until the waiting is no longer an option. Nokia waited, and by the time they moved, the world had already moved on without them. Do not be Nokia. Before you go tonight, if this story stayed with you, if David's reaction to that chapter felt familiar, please share this video. Not for us, for someone in your life who is standing still in a world that is moving. This story might be exactly what they need to hear right now. Hit the like button if Nokia's story surprised you. And subscribe to Finext Wealth if you want one story like this every single week. Real companies, real decisions, real consequences, told clearly, with the numbers and the truth. Thank you for spending this time with us tonight. Genuinely, deeply, thank you. From everyone at Finext Wealth. We will see you next week.